Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Utah Cultural Sector Community Update. We will begin the call in about 3 minutes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Utah Cultural Community Sector Update. We will begin the call in about 2 minutes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining early to the Cultural Community Sector Community Update. We will be starting the call in about 1 minute. Give people some time to log in. Hello, everyone. It is 3:30. Thank you so much for joining us for the Utah Cultural Sector Community Update. We will begin now. Thanks, Crystal.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're so happy to have you here as part of our Cultural Sector Community Update call. If you don't know me already, my name is Crystal Young-Otterstrom, and I am Executive Director of Utah Cultural Alliance and Utah Cultural Alliance Foundation. And we're so happy to be here with you today. We host these calls together with Utah Department of Heritage and Arts, Utah Division of Arts and Museums, Utah Museums Association, Utah Humanities, UCA, and of course, our local arts agencies. We have a very exciting call for you today and just want you to know that it should take about an hour of your time, so please plan on that. Closed captioning is available and it can be accessed by clicking on the closed caption button below and choosing Show Subtitle. Throughout the call, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and then I will ask them for you of our panelists. And today we are going to have an exciting program. So first, Dean Taylor Randall, I can speak today, will be talking about the state's COVID economic recovery plan, and I will read his bio in just a second. I just want to give you guys an overview of the call, and then joining him will be Dave Carlback, who is with the World Trade Center, and he will be talking about the second draw PPP loans that for some businesses are open now, and for pretty much all will be available around Friday, I believe. And then Jill Love, Director of Department of Heritage and Arts, will give an update on the governor's budget, and Kat Potter will give updates on the Thrive 125, celebrating 125 years of Utah's Q&A of Utah's statehood. And then following that, we'll do the Q&A for our panelists. So first to introduce Dean Taylor Randall. And Dean Randall, you can unmute yourself and show your video now if you'd like. And he has led the University of Utah David Eccles School of Business since 2009. Dean Randall has elevated the school's national reputation as a place of innovation, garnering top 10 entrepreneurship rankings for both undergraduate and graduate programs. In 2019 and 2020 alone, 8 of the school's programs were ranked top 25. Dean Randall graduated from the University of Utah with honors in accounting and then earned an MBA and PhD in operations and information management from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. His research there focused on the economic impact of operational strategies. Dean Randall's roots at the University of Utah run deep. His grandfather Clive served as dean of the business school, and Dean Randall's father Reed also worked at the U as a professor and director of the School of Accounting. And I would also like to introduce Dave Carlback, who is VP of International Investment at the World Trade Center, Utah. And he is responsible for the WTC's International Investment Program. And as all things are a little bit different this year, has also been running the PPP Rapid Response Team, which is a team of volunteers across the state where you can go to ask your questions on the PPP application. And last round, many members of the staff of all of our organizations here participated, including our own team here at UCA, and are participating on it again. And so we are here to all serve. And so he will be talking about the SBA program and PPP grants. And with that, I turn it over to the two of you.
Crystal, thanks a lot. I'm going to take a few minutes at the first to provide a little bit of a high-level overview, and then I'll be turning it over to Dave for some of the details. And I know this group has already covered a lot of this some of this on a webinar last week, so we'll try to not be too redundant. Well, first off, let me just say it's a pleasure to be in front of you, and I cannot wait until we get the cultural sector and arts sector back up and operational. It means a lot to our state. As I've said a number of times, you are the soul of our economy. You make us feel alive and that we are normal again, and we are hopeful that in the next 4 to 6 months, you'll see some significant activity. Let me give you just a high-level overview of the state's economy itself, and then talk very specifically about what I think the state is looking at doing the next 3 to 6 months. The state overall is faring relatively well. Our unemployment is at 4.3%, which is is probably top 10 in the country, and our year-on-year job loss is certainly number 1 or number 2, meaning we haven't lost as many jobs. And we're hopeful as the numbers come out at the end of December, we'll actually show that we've drawn even. To put that in perspective, we had nearly 130 people file for unemployment at the beginning of the crisis, and we're down below 30,000 now. So 100,000 have kind of come back down off of the unemployment insurance rolls, and that is indeed good news. However, it is what we call a K-shaped recovery, meaning that certain industries are doing very, very well. Other industries that have a lot of personal contact and personal touch are not. And unfortunately, your industry, falls into that case. And I think what we've got to do is find creative ways to get you through the next few months until we get things a little bit more back to normal. So if I were to describe the state's strategy going forward, there is an unbelievable emphasis on getting vaccines in people's arms, increasing the testing that's going on, and then finally just reinforcing the importance of hygiene protocols, wearing masks, social distancing, to keep that up until we get vaccines in people's arms. So let me give you a little bit of an update on each of those three, and then talk to you a little bit about the economic side of things. The vaccine process is really just getting underway. Vaccines are coming into the state. There's a big emphasis right now on getting what we called phase 1 individuals all up and running. So this was healthcare, critical, some of the first responders, teachers, and then moving into age brackets, so 70 and above. And I think you're likely to see the age bracket rollout of vaccines continue. And so once we've got the healthcare done, the teachers and first responders, then we basically, you're just going to see a rollout in terms of age groups. The hope is by the end of February to have nearly 500,000 vaccines out. So I want to give you a little bit of perspective. These are back of the envelope numbers. We haven't done a lot of sophisticated modeling yet. But if you think about it, we have 2.2 million people age of 18 and above. So 500,000 getting vaccines gives us immunity, and we're coming up on a fourth of those. You also have 250 to 300,000 people that we know have had COVID and have some type of immunity. And you can probably double, and if not optimistic, but if you're aggressive, triple that number. So by the end of February, we're going to have a significant portion of our population that has some kind of immunity. And the hope is that as that immunity grows, we see caseloads decrease significantly. There are a lot of unknowns. We don't know how long antibodies and immunity remains in the system following vaccines. We don't know that yet exactly after actually somebody having an active case. So a lot of these numbers will adjust. And in fact, I find in the meetings I'm at, this changes almost on a daily basis. The other optimistic piece is there will be 2 more vaccines that will come online to add to the possible or the supply. And so the hope is within a month and a half that we don't have as many supply constraints in terms of those vaccines. So that's what's going on in the vaccine world. There is really just massive emphasis and shifting to try to get those vaccines in as many people's arms as possible. The second thing that's happening is a big increase in testing, making it available when everybody potentially needs one. The basics behind this is if we can, in particular, target demographic groups that have a lot more prevalence in them, we can hopefully manage it better with more testing. That's why you're going to see all of the returning university students receive vaccines, or not vaccines, but be tested in the first 10 days that they return to school, to try to eliminate that big lift, or the big kind of surge that we saw in cases as people returned to school. And then finally, we continue just to see continued evidence that the mask wearing and hygiene protocols work. And so if we can just stay disciplined while the vaccines are being distributed, I think that's going to help a lot. This financial crisis is a health crisis. So reducing caseloads, reducing all those things will actually allow us to open up the economy back up. Now in specifics, and I know Jill Love probably has more details on the governor's budget than I do, so I'm not going to cover a lot of that. I think there are 2 sets of aid that are coming. The first one Dave will talk about, and that's the PPP loans, the additional loans coming through the federal stimulus. And then the governor specifically is singling out aid to hard hit industries. And what we have tried to encourage is that grants be administered via GoEd, similar to what you saw last time. So things like the Shop in Utah, the small business quarantine grant, those things we're hoping will continue. There also is the opportunity to create some new granting programs that are maybe more specific. But if you look at the economic data, 77% of our job loss that remains is really focused on 3 industries, 3 what we call 2-digit NAICS code industries. And they are all hospitality, event related industries, with the exception of mining. And so really the money, the effort probably needs to go into helping bridge the gap between now and when we have a society that's fairly immune to COVID-19. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Dave, who I asked to talk briefly about his efforts. The World Trade Center has been remarkable. Already mentioned by Crystal, they've been remarkable. They have set up a rapid response team. I've never seen anything quite like it. They have been quick, efficient, and extremely useful and to organizations that need to have information on the federal stimulus. So Dave, thank you. And then I'll just turn the time over to you.
You're very welcome, Taylor. Thank you for that introduction. And I'm happy to help generally and be on this call and share a bit more information. I'll also try to keep it brief and leave time for Q&A. You teed it up as a discussion about PPP loans. I'll also try to say something about a few other products that the SBA is providing, including EIDL loans and shuttered venue operators loans, which I think are of particular interest here. I think they're also known as Save Our Stages or SOS grants. But just to, before I get to that, just to step back. So we are working under the auspices of the Economic Recovery Task Force, which is a group that was pulled together by the governor when COVID first hit back in the spring. And under that, there was a team, a working group focused on how to take maximum advantage of federal programs, which the CARES Act was, and it has many pieces to it, including the ones I just mentioned. So that's under that umbrella, we formed what Taylor just mentioned, which is this rapid response team, which was to put at least a voice, if not a face, to the program and help many small businesses get a better understanding of what the programs are and ultimately get to the right resource to hopefully make an application and get the money that the program provided. We were very successful, and as a state, we led the country in the percentage of eligible businesses that actually received grants. We were proud of that as a state and would like to think that the rapid response team played a role in helping, at least at the margins, get more companies connected to the right program. The current program goes under the name of the Economic Aid Act. That's there's even a broader act, Consolidated something or other Act, which includes other pieces. But the one that provides economic aid, the part of the act that provides economic aid, goes under the name of Economic Aid Act. And it provides for several things, but it provides for the three things in particular that I just mentioned, which is PPP loans, Paycheck Protection Program loans, more EIDL, economic impact disaster loans, I think is what the EIDL stands for, as well as these Save Our Stages grants. In terms of the PPP loans, there were hundreds of billions of dollars given out under that program, as I'm sure you all know. And that program ended sometime in the fall, I believe. And under this act, it's been reopened. So anyone who didn't apply before can apply now. So it's reopened just like before. But it also provided for what are known as second draw loans. So those who applied before and received a grant can get a second grant. So there are two pieces to the PPP program. It reopens the original program, and it provides for those who receive grants under the original program to get a second draw. And sometimes that's not so clear, but I think that's important to keep in mind, especially if you're a company that did not receive one originally, but wish you had. Now is your chance. It's reopened and you can apply again. For the second draw, they're limiting it to smaller companies only. So the whole program originally and now was designed for small companies with basically fewer than 500 employees. To get a second loan, you need to be even smaller. You need to be 300 or smaller. There are many details associated with both that have been tweaked for both the first and the second draw under this program. almost all of them, or maybe all of them, are favorable. So I'll just name a few just to give you a sense. They made the expenses for which you can use the money broader. These loans, I should have said to start with, as you probably know, may be forgiven if you meet certain criteria. And one of those criteria, an important one, is that you use the money for its intended purpose. And they expanded the intended purposes for which they'll give forgiveness. So those are some examples. They also earmarked certain subsets of the money for different communities, for low-income communities, for certain industries like hotels and restaurants, things like this, to increase the chances that the money is there for the hardest impact or overlooked groups that didn't take full advantage or as much advantage of the program originally. So those are some things in the background. They wouldn't necessarily be obvious to somebody applying, but they're there to protect those communities and increase the chance that the money is used more broadly. Hopefully that makes sense. The other type of product that I mentioned is the EIDL loan. The PPP loan has to be used for certain purposes. Again, they broaden those purposes, but it's not as broad as what you can use the economic impact disaster loan, EIDL. So the EIDL loan is a very long-term, low-cost loan that you can get from the SBA directly. And they added money to that, so there's more of that available. And the other thing that's very nice is when you do apply for an EIDL loan, you can ask that up to $1,000 per employee, up to a maximum of $10,000 is given to you as a grant. And you can get the grant and refuse the rest of the loan. So it's another way to get money for free. And again, it has fewer strings attached. And when it's given to you as a grant, it's grant, and you don't have to apply for forgiveness. So that's another program from the SBA that was funded. And then the other one that I think is particularly relevant for this group is the Save Our Stages grant. And I apologize, I don't have as much detail on that. I believe from what I've read that you will apply for that the same way you would apply for an EIDL loan, which is not through a bank, but directly through the SBA. I've been, since Taylor called me, I've been feverishly looking at the SBA site to see if I can see where to apply for that, and I cannot find it. I did reach out to the SBA just now to find out where can you apply for the Save Our Stages grant. Those grants are specifically for live venue operators or promoters, theatrical producers, live performing arts organizations, talent representatives, movie theaters, or relevant museums. So I suspect that's particularly interesting to this group, and I don't have much detail there. I do have a phone number and an email, and I'll pause before I share that if that's helpful. You could also send an email to us, and then it will get logged in our rapid response team, and we'll get back to you through that vehicle as we get more details. And I'll give you that email right now. And that's COVID response, all one word, COVID response @utah.gov. And if you explain your question, that should come in. And as I figure out the answer to the basic question of how do you apply, I'll make sure the rapid response team knows, and then they'll get back to you. So that's what I have to say generally about our work, and in particular about the PPP loans, the EIDL loans and grants, and the Save Our Stages grants.
Thanks. Thanks, Dave. Did you want us to take some questions? I know there are a few in the Q&A. Dave, if you can, I think a couple of those apply to you.
Okay, I haven't read them yet.
I'll go ahead
and
read them of you too, if that's all right.
You'll tee them up? Okay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, in the chat, we have put a link. UCA did a training on the Save Our Stages, which the SBA is calling Shuttered Events Grants. And we put a link to that information in the chat. And then also as an FYI for everybody, the regional SBA is doing a webinar for the cultural industry on the second draw PPP loans on Wednesday. And I believe Ruth is going to put that in the chat. So a couple of questions have already been answered by Dean Randall, who's just right on top of it. But for the purposes of the recording, I'm just going to overview those really quickly. So the first question was, they've heard of some countries doing a single dose and then waiting longer than the recommended 21 days for the second dose. Is that part of Utah's plan? And Dean Randall answered that that is not currently part of Utah's plan, but of course it's always being actively analyzed and evaluated. And then there's a question that asked about the difficulty of signing up for slots and vaccine availability. And Dean Randall said they're actively attempting to increase vaccine supplies. And again, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. So I'm going to start with from anonymous attendee, can nonprofits apply for PPP, and can you apply for both PPP and the shuttered events or Save Our Stages? And Dave, would you like to answer that, or would you?
So nonprofits can apply, and in fact, they expanded that. But you know, nonprofit is not. There's 501c6 and 501c3. They expanded the nonprofits that are covered, but I'm not sure that it's every nonprofit. What I saw, I'm just trying to look for. I just wrote that down. The eligibility was expanded to include 501c6 nonprofits, including local newspapers, radio, and television broadcasters. So that was the expanded. So as well, 501c3s and 501c19. So as well as tribal business concerns. So maybe it is complete now. Those are all specifically called out as eligible. So that's that. And with respect to whether you can get an SOS, Save Our Stages grant and a PPP loan.
You have to choose one or the other.
I think you do have to, you know the answer. Okay, that's what I was going to say from what I just read, but you go, Crystal.
Yeah, you have to choose one or the other. The SBA just clarified that you may apply for both, and then you can choose to accept which one you're going to take. So if you believe, originally we were saying if you believed you were eligible for the Save Our Stages, to wait and not apply for the PPP loans because they're going to open and close before the shuttered events opens. But the SBA is now saying you can apply for both and then choose which one you're going to accept. The next question is regarding state allocation of funds and capital projects. Is there any chance to reinitiate local capital campaigns through state grants that serve new build museum projects? Is this, I'm not sure if this is a question for you or not, but is this time to engage state legislators or wait until specific hospitality grant funding has been completed? Thank you.
I can offer a little bit of insight there. I think it is time to engage state legislators on that. I think the one thing I did fail to mention, that the state budget is in good shape this year because of this K-shaped recovery. And so I think they will, while money's never plentiful, they do have money this year to consider requests like this. So I think it is time to talk to legislators.
Great, thank you so much. And then the next question I'll ask for Marianne Urban. Could you please update us on testing and vaccine outreach to BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities?
Yeah, the Department of Health does have actually a group of people that deal directly with this. And I'm not going to be able to provide as detailed an example, or excuse me, a detailed answer, but I do get a regular update on how that outreach is going with specifics in terms of testing. And I know they do have several special testing programs for them. In terms of the vaccine, they, again, working through that same group of individuals, are making sure that communication is getting out to them and to influencers in those communities. It will get rolled out by age group after this kind of phase one, which is singled out certain, certain work groups. But after that, it will get rolled out by age group across all kind of elements of society.
Thank you so much. to stay on the federal relief bill topic, can EIDL be reapplied for round 2 if you've already received it before? I actually don't know the answer to that one.
Hmm.
Do either of you two
It's a
know?
good question.
Have a second one.
I don't know either. I know I don't know. The one thing I will say that isn't, if you have received EIDL, which sounds like the asker did, that money was originally deemed that it would reduce the amount of your PPP loan forgiveness, not the loan, but how much would be forgiven, so that you wouldn't double dip between the forgiveness of the PPP loan and the EIDL grant. And they did change that. So the EIDL grant will no longer reduce the amount of forgiveness on your PPP loan. And they're doing that retroactively. So that's one good thing. As far as whether you can get a second EIDL grant, have to research that. Sorry.
No problem. And then this question is, do you know if the SOS or the Shuttered Events grants will be given on a first come, first serve basis?
Yeah, I was reading about that, and there is a prioritization mechanism that that I was reading about. I'll just give you a feel for that. Sorry, let me just look that up quickly. It says that the first priority period, during the first 14 days, they will only award grants to applicants who had less than 10% of their revenue during the previous period. So ones that had 90% or more reduction. And then the second priority, the next 14 days, would be a 30%, a 70% reduction, who had not more than 30%. So they are trying to make it through that flow to those most heavily impacted. And they're going to hold back 20% in general. They're only going to give out 80% of the money during the first 28 days, during those two 14-day periods, if that makes sense. So that's the kind of thing they're doing on a prioritize to prioritize and make the money last longer.
Thank you. And I'll add to that, Angela's probably referencing that in our nonprofit world, we have kind of a, if grants are merit-based or if it's just you're first in the queue, and our understanding from the SBA is it's first in the queue as long as you meet those requirements of either 90% loss, 70% loss, and then everybody else between 25% and 70% lost. Wendy Hassan up in Logan says, Dean Randall, thank you so much for including arts and culture in the state's economic recovery plan. And have you noticed any best practices for organizations and businesses who seem poised to rebound from this crisis? And is there anything our industry can do to help with the overall plan?
You know, I think most of my ideas have come from observing what you're doing. So I'm not sure I can add anything new. I think we're certainly seeing organizations in the event industry that are now actually opening with appropriate social distancing, even in, even though it's not probably as economically advantageous as they have hoped. And in fact, I think this is one of the roles that each of you can play, is just showing us how we can have these events in a safe way. It's something we actually, I think, need to learn as a society. And I saw, I guess, a question from Lindsay Ferrari. What do I think the role is? Your industry helps us realize that we're normal, that we can celebrate. And I don't know about you, but for me, this crisis has been much more emotional and taken a much deeper emotional toll on me than anything I think I've been through in the past. And I'm always looking for things to make me happy, to make me celebrate my humanity. And I think that is shared far and wide in the administration of our government right now, that the cultural sector will bring us through in a healthy way. And you can teach us to celebrate again. You can teach us how to hold these events in a safe way, and we hope you will.
Oh, Thank you so much. We all agree. Related to this industry helping us heal, the next question is, Dr. Fauci was one of the guest speakers at a National Performing Arts Presenters Conference earlier this week, and he suggested that the arts could be used in some of the public relations messaging to get the word out about the vaccine, et cetera. And do you have any comment or additional thoughts on that you'd like to add?
I think that's a great idea. I'm going to take it to our public relations folks tomorrow. Thank you.
I love it too. And then a question for me, if by some miracle that our representatives in federal government are able to put together a stimulus package that includes money for state and local governments, because as we all know, it wasn't included in this past package. And I know that the state of Utah, with your leadership, had already put together a proposal of how they would spend that money if they did get a second round of investment of stimulus from the feds. So if by some miracle that happens, how would the state invest that, especially to help this impacted industry recover? And to the state's credit, they're using some of their own money to do that in the program that you already discussed.
Yeah, I always hear two very consistent things. Let's make sure we identify people that are in need, help them bridge the gap between now and when we get back to normal. So I would anticipate grants, similar to what we've seen, but more targeted at industries. So this industry would fit that criteria clearly. And then the second thing that I hear very consistently is let's position ourselves for the long term. And what does that mean in kind of a practical sense? I think our state is fortunate in that we're well run. And so we don't have as much pain at the local municipality level and at the county level as other places. And so what this allows, it allows those entities to do as that money comes is to think about longer term infrastructure projects. And of course, I think many of you can think about those and how that might affect your organizations in the arts and cultural sector, because often that's where they're looking to make those investments.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Just for those who aren't watching the Q&A, there was a question asked about how much is the size of the Save Our Stages or Shared Events grants, and you can apply for up to 45% of your loss when comparing 2020 to 2019. And then if there's still money available after the 28-day priority period, you can ask for another 50% of that 45%. A lot of
And I
numbers.
think it's capped at 10 million.
It is capped at 10 million. Thank you for adding that.
For those of you with lofty ambitions.
Huge revenues. That's all the questions that are currently in the Q&A. I'll give everyone a quick second if there's anything else. But thank you so much for your time today, Dean Randall and Dave Carlbach. We so appreciate everything that you're doing for our industry and for the state of Utah. We couldn't live in any better place than here during a crisis like this, in my opinion. So thank you so much.
Well, hang in there and please let me know when you've got an event. I'm eager to attend.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We actually, NowPlayingUtah.com, there's events happening all over the state of Utah right now, in person and virtual. So you can get that healing now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. I am so excited to introduce our next speakers, who will be Jill Love from Department of Heritage and Arts, who will give an update on the governor's budget.
Hi, arts and culture friends. Thank you, Crystal. Vicki is putting into the chat, if she hasn't already, I believe a link to the social media that Governor Cox released earlier today that gives an overview of his budget and some of the highlights. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and share with you some of the highlights and then some of the things that we're excited about in his budget that impact our department and the broader cultural sector. In his proposed budget is 431 million towards an education investment, and this includes an increase by over 5% in the weighted pupil unit. It also includes a targeted investment to kids who are at risk that have been impacted by COVID and may be falling through the cracks a bit. An investment for enhanced kindergarten and computer sciences. There's a large investment in higher education and workforce development, including $20 million for those struggling to find work, including college advisors for workforce employment centers. There's a large investment in transportation and infrastructure, including $350 million to double track Front Runner, $50 million for transportation options in the Wasatch Canyons, and $120 million in open space investment. There is a new program of grants for rural Utah that will address some of the infrastructure needs that they have. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in a governor's budget, but it includes $50 million to enhance broadband in rural Utah, $69 million for a revolving loan fund for infrastructure for things like natural gas, roads, and sewer, and $6 million in electrical vehicle charging stations. So those are just some of the highlights. There's some capital investments also. But in terms of our department, we've been discussing the $100 million that was in his budget for pandemic response. This will be divided to address needs of individuals and households and impacted businesses. And we don't know yet how it will be released or how those needs will be framed, but it is both for individuals and impacted sectors. And that would be a one-time grant program. In terms of ongoing, the governor added to his budget $6 million in arts sustainability grants. And so many of you who follow this know that would take our program to almost 10 million. And that's certainly been our goal over the last 3 to 4 years. This would be ongoing and would really enhance our ability to support the cultural sector from the state and invest in all of you. Also in his budget is an additional $250,000 to our multicultural affairs program. And this would allow us to hire 2 new individuals. One would be doing community outreach and another equity and inclusion training. This is something right now that is really at a critical juncture. Our staff there is small, and this additional staffing would help us really meet the demands that are on this team. Also in his budget is money to hire a woman's history position in our history division. And this would take the work of Better Days and allow us to make it more permanent. Many states have a position like this where a researcher or writer can really unearth stories about women in history. And we're excited by this position and really think this is something that the Lieutenant Governor is championing. There's also many of you who have followed the plight of the state's historical artifact collections, know that they're in the basement of the Rio Grande. That building was hit hard this year by an earthquake. There's $15,000 to move those collections, not all of them, but some of the most critical to temporary storage at a warehouse nearby. So that's just kind of some brief highlights. But again, if you want more detail, you can go to the Governor Cox's social media page, and probably there will be links there to the entire budget, but certainly his presentation. So thanks, Crystal.
Thank you, Jill. And then before we pause again for Q&A, Kat Potter, who is the Associate Director of Heritage and Arts, will talk about Thrive 125, the state's anniversary celebration. Then I'll open it back up for, we'll almost open it back up, but we'll proceed to that moment. Thank you, Kat.
Thanks, Crystal. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to give a quick update on Thrive 125. For those who've been on this call before or have received the emails, you probably know about this, but Thrive 125 is a celebration of the 125th anniversary of Utah statehood, which the Department of Heritage and Arts is coordinating a series of programs and events that launch on Statehood Day, the actual anniversary day, on January 4th, last Monday, but will continue throughout 2021. If you missed the television program that aired on all 4 of our local broadcast network affiliates, it is available to stream on our website, as well as some bonus features. So we hope that you'll visit and see some of our wonderful Utah artists and musicians. We were just able to scratch the surface of our vibrant arts community in bringing together some of those musicians and artists. And we look forward to all that we're able to do in 2021. We were able to start our virtual event series, which we are doing in partnership with Utah Humanities. Our first event was last Thursday, January 7th, and it was a play reading of the play Suffrage in partnership with Plan B Theater, and we hope that you will be able to go back and watch that if you weren't able to attend. We'll have a streaming version of that available shortly on our website. And again, the website is thrive125.utah.gov. We also had an event on Saturday, which pitted 2 MCs against each other, along with DJs and break dancers, and that will also be available for streaming. But we have our next events coming up soon, and we'll have a series of events, 6 to 8 additional events that will happen between now and the end of February. In addition, we are launching a physical exhibit at the Capitol building on January 25th. And on that same day, we will launch a digital exhibit online, and it will talk about the anniversary of statehood, but also talk about Utah before statehood, and really celebrate our state. So we hope that you'll take advantage of both of those exhibits. Also on our website right now is a curriculum video for students that talks about the history of statehood. And we also have an architectural story map that you can visit now. Again, all of these are available on thrive125.utah.gov. And we will be updating this site regularly, so we hope that you'll go back frequently and see which events are added. And finally, we are partnering with other cultural groups, arts and cultural groups, for a number of events throughout the year, and we hope that we'll be able to partner with many of you. So if you have ideas for partnership on statehood anytime this year in 2021, please reach out to me or to Jill, and we'd love to speak further. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kat. Our third speaker before I open it up for Q&A will be Ruth White, who is the Outreach Director at Utah Cultural Alliance, and she'll be talking about virtual advocacy, Cultural Virtual Advocacy Week coming up during the session.
Wonderful. Okay, this year, all of our advocacy events will be virtual because COVID. So be on the lookout. We will be publishing our 45 days of advocacy calendar of activities within the next week. We have been working with leaders from across the cultural industry to do that. And we hope that all of you will participate with us on that. We're also introducing our first ever Cultural Advocacy Week this year. So the entire industry will come together to advocate February 8th through 12th. So while we'll still have those virtual activities throughout the session, there'll be a focus during that week. We really truly believe that together we are stronger as we advocate for arts and culture. So we look forward to you joining us during the next 45 days of the session, but also in making your own plans to advocate throughout the year for the cultural industry.
Great, thank you, Ruth. And now if you have any other questions, you can put them in the Q&A for Jill, Kat, and Ruth. There is not a question, but a wonderful kudos from Wendy that says, what wonderful news. We are so fortunate to have such great leadership at Department of Heritage and Arts, Utah Arts and Museums, and Utah Cultural Alliance. Thank you so much for all of your efforts on our behalf for advocating for arts and culture funding and for the quick turnaround and getting it distributed throughout the state. And she put a heart emoji. Thank you, Wendy. I don't see any questions, open questions for these three, but we'll give you just a second if you want to put them in. I think we're good.
And Crystal, while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions, I wanted to just put a couple more plugs in for UCA's upcoming trainings. We do have a training scheduled on Wednesday with the SBA district leaders to go through the PPP, the IDLE, and the Save Our Stages shuttered venues. So if you have specific questions, please bring them to that. It will be recorded for UCA members to view after the fact. And as we mentioned earlier in the call, there are a couple of us staff members who are serving on the rapid response team. So if you have questions, also, it is a great way to get your questions answered is to submit them through the coronavirus.utah.gov page. And I know that those of us that are employed in this industry do watch out for those questions from organizations in our industry to come so that we can make sure you get the answers that you need.
Thank you so much, Ruth. All right, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, so I want to thank you all for joining us. Two things to please put on your calendar in addition to the webinar that Ruth already mentioned. This Thursday at 10 a.m., UCA will be hosting its first ever Cultural Connect, where we'll be announcing our strategic plan, giving an overview of the session, and also making an exciting announcement. So you can RSVP at the link that I think we've already put in the chat. Please mark your calendars for our next call, which will be on Monday, February 8th at 3:30 p.m. We have a very exciting agenda in the works, so we hope that you'll make it there. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.